Okay, so if no questions, we can continue. So now we will be covering module 3, right? Module 3, code-based visualization of real-world biomedical data. Okay, so before we start, right? So I would say that was probably least expected, typically from people who do not do code-based data analysis, that you can actually do visualization using the code, right? And usually you do visualization, let's say in Excel, where you do, let's say, pie chart and bar plots and things like that. But I would say you have limited capacities, like very nice visualization typically is done using code-based solution. And then again, they're more reproducible, right? So you can share the code so others can reproduce your figure, but even for yourself, I would say it's more effective because you can scale. Meaning if you have 10 data sets and you need to do box plots for each of them, writing one code for one data set, you can use it as template to scale it. But in general, like there are some interesting and cool visualization techniques like heat maps, and it's quite intense and actively developing field where data is visualized in a nice way. So like if you open some good publications and you look at the figures are extremely important for both projects and publications. And my personal opinion, figures should speak, like literally, in quotes, they should speak in the sense that you should be able to open the paper and just look at the figures and get the story of the paper. So that's my strong opinion, and I try to follow it. I try to design the figure in the publication so that just looking purely at the figures, not reading a single line of the paper, people should get idea what are you doing in this research. So I think there is, and many people share the same kind of opinion I do, and and people spend researchers are spending a lot of time designing effective figures which can reveal the story you're telling, by your research or the project. Okay. So what are the learning objectives? I think you want to learn how to visually display the data. I mean, in other words, do the figures in real time. Understand, I think that's crucial, understand the strengths and the weaknesses of different visualization techniques. That's crucial because none of the visualization techniques will be perfect in all circumstances. All the time you're compromising something, right? It's either a lot of details or less details, but sometimes this is what you want. You want to be abstract, very high level, or very attached to details. So there are different techniques. Yeah, and then like very practically, right? We want you to learn how to do various types of plots, and we'll show you a bunch of them. And in particular, we're going to use Cborn and MATLAB to make elements of the plot easier to read and understand, right? Like Cborn, Matplotlib are both libraries, very popular one. I would say Cborn, the simplest possible library. It has a lot of settings being provided to you. So, like by writing very little code, you can get decent publication quality figures. Okay, so I think it's quite widely accepted that visualization is a critical skills in research, but also in any type of data analysis, right? Like especially presenting and interpreting, it helps interpretation of the results. Because sometimes you could just not look at the data. If your data is, again, millions of data points, if you can put just the mean, yeah, it's meaningful, but to the certain extent. Like if you compute even standard deviation. So just numbers or single numbers have limited capacity. So sometimes to get the trends from the data, you really need to visualize it. So, and then again, if you're doing that effectively, you can effectively extract the trends and understand your data better, or sometimes get the flaws of the data. Like data is never perfect and people make mistakes, and you can capture that if you look at the data through visualization lens. Okay, so I think the good saying, which I like a lot, like we are drawing in information, so there's a lot of information around, but we are starving for knowledge. So I think visualization gives you those knowledge, can summarize kind of the information and provides the knowledge. And I think it's like in general, like here we are mostly covering technical components, like how to do it, right? Like if you want to do Boxplot, how would I do the Boxplot? However, visualization is more than that. Visualization is not only about like being able to do it, but how about designing, right? Selecting the right figure and creating like effective visualization. So I think it's more than computational skills. That's experience, your vision, you know, many other components. We'll touch based on that, but I think mostly we focus on you know, like on the technical part. And we provide, I mean, in this module, you will get, I would say, state of the art, the most popular visualization techniques. So you can do a lot with them. So you just need to choose the right one for your project. And you can try them all, usually. If you don't know in advance, and probably nobody knows, I mean, personally, I don't. When we start the project and start analysis of the data, I always ask students to do several types of visualization, and I look and I see what is the best. You know, like you cannot know that in advance, despite like amount of experience you have, because you don't know what is the data like. I mean, you have some idea, but you don't know really. So, you know, like, so trying, you know, like having the skills to try and play around with the data until you find the effective visualization technique, which suits your data. Okay. I think it's like, again, like a little bit more motivation. So why why visualization and the figures are important? Because visualization stand, you know, like people notice that they can understand it quite fast and quite effectively. And probably the first thing you notice, you know, like any presentation is around, let's say, visualization, right? That's became a good standard in the field. And typically, if you have too much text in your publication, that's considered not a great approach, right? In general, so more figures when you present and less text, right? So that's why you need to know how to do figures. I think it's like, you know, picture tells 1,000 words, you know, like that's true, cliche, but true. I think they're more shareable, you know, like if you think about Twitter or like others, like, you know, social media platforms, people sharing the signs, you know, like if you share the figure, I think it will be noticeable. If you write a lot of text, I'm not sure somebody will read it. So that's the case. I think they're multi-purpose. They can be used in the paper, sure. They can use in your poster, perhaps, talks, presentations, you know, project and so on. So they are multi-purpose. They're nice to have everywhere. Okay, so that's kind of motivation. So, and a little bit more on that, you know, like on the general lines. I think we want, by visualization, fundamentally, we want to make your results clear. You know, like people look at the results and they understand what's going on. Retain focus. You know, like, so it should be like a good balance of details from one hand, but also some message. You should be able to look at the figure and understand the message, right? You look at the figure and say, oh, now I understand that there is a genetic variant responsible for obesity, and then it's located on the chromosome, I don't know, 21. I understand that, okay. And then that was obtained from 1,000 samples being collected, I don't know, from Moldova, Ukraine. Like the figure should tell you that in a sense. So now, I mean, good approach is not to fool your audience, like not to design the figure, which you can, you know, like in a way that it will tell not true, you know, like it will highlight some parts of the data and will kind of shade and hide another part, so you're misleading the audience. So don't do that. I think be transparent, you know, like in the sense that make sure labels and titles are descriptive and non-ambiguous, you know, like, so you want to describe every x-axis, y-axis, like all the details and so on. And then usually for that, at least in the papers, you have caption, right? You have like, when you say figure one, the name, and then you start describing. So you can kind of like say a lot of there, but also on the figure itself, you can add some details, like people to understand what type of the data you're working with. Okay, so a bit more. So we, in this module, primarily, we want to learn how, right? How to do the figures. We will not talk about like effective visualization that much, because it's more, probably it cannot be covered in one module, but rather comes with the experience. But if you want to read more, there is a great blog in general, how you choose the figure, like, you know, like should you do high level, low level, and things like that. So that's a person, I think she's a faculty at MIT, probably. So, but she did a great kind of like blog or PDF in this case about that. Okay. Now, so there are some cons, there are some pros and the cons as usually. So let's kind of like have a glance on that. So I think pros, fast and easy to use. I would say that's the case. Like, like when you do, and again, like in Excel, if you have a lot of data, probably hard to do visualization and sometimes impossible. Here, fast and easy. And then you can do powerful adjustments, like change a figure, adjust the figures quite easy with the code. So cons, disadvantages. So I think you can do adjustments, but you don't kind of touch the data, like you don't see the data. So I think it's common. I think it's both kind of disadvantage and advantage. It depends how you use it. And I think it's like the disadvantage of graphical interface, like Excel, that is non-reproducible. Like all adjustments you're doing by hand. So it's not reproducible, so other cannot reproduce it, but even for yourself, you will not be able to repeat the same experiment for the different data. Like one data is coming to you, do the box plot, but another data is coming and you need to do another box plot. So you need to start from scratch, which I think it's waste of time. So rather it's better to invest time and learn how to do code-based visualization, and then it will be quite quickly to do for any type of the data coming to. Okay, but again, like I think Excel makes sense for the very simple plots, but I think it's possible to leave Excel only for very tiny and simple plots, but the rest can be done quite easily. You will see with the code base. It's quite easy and possible. Okay, a little bit more. So we talk about code-based visualization. Pros are easy to share. So we'll talk about that in the next module, how we share so other people can reproduce. Can be combined with data manipulation and cleaning. So we can make one basically Jupyter notebook, Google Colab, where we put how we clean the data and how we visualize the data, which is nice. We have all the steps of cleaning, visualization, things like that in one thing. Very transparent, obviously, and reproducible. You can share it easily and others can reproduce and so on. Scalable. So what that means, having one code written can be scaled, or in other words, applied across a large number of other data sets you're dealing with. Over time, like let's say you did it this month, and new data comes next month. So this month you spent like 3 hours or whatever, one day creating the code. So you invested time, but you have a very nice notebook. Now the new data comes, so instead of spending one day, again, you spend like 5 minutes, right? So it's scalable. Okay, cons, I think higher barrier to entry, meaning that you need to learn something and you need to work to get the skills to create that notebook, which what you're here for. I think less intuitive sometimes, again, if you don't have experience with the code, might be less intuitive, might be a little bit confusing, but I think that can be overcome with the practice. Okay, any questions so far? So that was like kind of general introduction, motivation part, like why and how and so on. But now, I mean, why mostly, now we're gonna talk how. So any questions so far? Okay, so I hope you're motivated, right? So you got enough kind of motivation why you would like to do it. So now let's see how. So there are two popular libraries for visualization, like one Cborn, Matplotlib, another one. So we will be mostly using Cborn because it's easier. So I chose the most kind of accessible library, but we're gonna use occasionally Matplotlib when we cannot avoid it. Sometimes we need to do some adjustments, but Cborn, let's say, will not have it. And Cborn is also a relatively newer library, so it's more kind of like state of the art in some sense, but again, it's easier. I think that's the primary reason we're using that, just easier to use. Okay, So what are the figures elements? Before we go to the figures, like kind of theoretical slide in some sense, what are the figure elements? So there is a lot of like elements on the figure. So that's one of the figure. So you have labels, right? First of all, you have axes, okay? So just making sure everybody's aware, x-axis, y-axis. Okay, then we have labels, right? So we have some numbers here, like 0.25, 0.5, and so on, right? Some labels. It can be a lot of labels, less labels. It's only depends on you, right? Do you want to keep it busy with the labels, or do you want to have less labels? That will be up to you. And you can see there are different styles on the x-axis versus y-axis. On the x-axis, you have a lot of labels, right? So meaning that, you know, like people can really see what is the number. However, on the y-axis, we decided to keep kind of like the ticks, you know, like those lines, but remove the labels. So you only have 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. You don't see what is in between. But here you do. So that different style depends what is better for you. Then, so some other elements I think we'll get. Legend, I think very important, right? You want to say what is blue versus red. People need to know that. Title, sure, title of the figure, you can add that. Then I would say what is not here, name of the x-axis and name of the y-axis. Like what is x-axis? For example, I don't know, like blood pressure of people, and y-axis is age. Why not, right? We'll see some correlation, right? For example. So we need to, like, looking at the figure, you don't need to go, the point is like you don't need to go anywhere else to understand the figure. All you need to know about the figure should be on the figure, right? So all the details. Okay. So we're gonna start with Cborn. So, and again, the reason is easy, but also have a lot of well-defined set of hard things easy to, right? So they make hard things easy to do. And this is what exactly I hope you and I are looking for, right? Like some easy code we can use and get started. Okay, so import Cborn. So remember with the pandas, right? In order to use pandas, you need to import it all the time. So the same, absolutely the same. You need to import this library. This is the library, Cborn. So we need to import it, and we're going to import it as S and C, just abbreviation. Okay. So Cborn has some example data sets. We're going to use those. So we're going to load data sets, right? Like there are two ways to do it. So we can use what they have provided. That's why we say cborn.load dataset. In your real life, you will use the data frame you have got, and you know how to load it. You are going to load it as CSV file and in the data frame and so on, but it's the same. Okay. So the data set we're going to use are tips, basically how much people pay at the restaurant, right? When they order the food, I mean, extra money for service. So, okay, so that's the data set. So there is such data set, tips. That's why we're able to load. Again, in real life, you will use data frame you have processed with pandas. Okay, so as we load the data set, either through pandas or like Cborn here, the very first step all the time to do is to look at the data. Make sure you understand. So let's look at the data, right? So we call it categorical data. That's our name. That's our data frame, categorical underscore data. And then we want to look at that, and you know the function for that coming from pandas, right? Head, right? Okay, so you see some connection obviously between Cborn and the pandas. Okay, so this is our data. So total bill, how much people spend for food, how much tip they get, like extra for the waiter, and then was it like waiter female or male, smoker, day, Sunday, Monday, and so on. Was it time, dinner, and size, probably number of people were having the dinner. Okay, so that's our data. So makes sense, right? You look, okay, bill is the numbers, makes sense. Sunday is I mean, day, Sunday, Monday. Okay, so like, you know, just examining by eye. Things make sense. So we can work with this data. Okay, so there is a lot of ways to visualize the data. So more or less I put them here, like the major one. And then what I highlight in orange boxes, this is what we're gonna cover, right? So we'll talk about bar plots, box plots, strip plots, violin plots. They're quite similar to each other. Then we'll talk about line plots, scatter plots, and then we'll end up with the most, I think, detailed visualization, which is the heat maps. Okay, but there are, as you can see, more than that. So this is what we want to focus on this module, module number 3. Okay, so let's kind of start with kind of in general, and then we'll jump into like something more specific. Okay, so categorical plot. So categorical plots are the plots where we have a categorical variable, like color, time, tissue type, and so on. And then, oops, sorry. And then here is the categorical, yeah, and numerical variable for measurement, right? So we measure. So we have some measurement across tissue type, let's say, right? And the goal is to compare one measurement across many categories. For example, number of lymphocytes across tissue types, right? For example, or actually across individuals, or any kind of across individuals. Less, of course. How about across case controls, right? So we have measurement number of lymphocytes, and we have case controls. So we want to compare, like if the number of lymphocytes is increased in the cases versus control. And there is very, very many different ways to plot, so we'll cover some of them. Okay, so bar plots, probably the most famous type of the plot, where one use of it, so we can actually display percentages. For example, when we do the pie chart, right, this famous diagram. So one way not to do pie chart, especially when you have many, many categories, sometimes it's not that readable, right? You just have like chunks, like pieces, which are very tiny, so it's very hard to see. So bar plot is alternative. So basically your measurement will be the percentage. Sure, that's a good alternative. And actually, interestingly, Cborn, they don't like pie chart. Like they have strong feelings about pie chart, so they don't let you do pie chart with Cborn. There is no such an option. Okay, so you're left with doing bar plot instead of pie chart. But generally, I think more often bar plot is used to compare the means or the medians, right? So like every kind of bar here, right, will be the mean. I mean, I think, yeah, the mean by default. So you want to compare the means across categories. Again, like if you think about lymphocytes, that will be the mean for the cases and the mean for the controls. That will be your bar plot. So what is the problem with the bar plot? What are the limitations? So obviously each plot will have some limitation. So limitation of bar plot is does not tell you the sample size. So sample size is the number of points in your data. So in other words, for your example, that's number of patients which are cases and number of patients which are controls. Let's say you have 100 and 120, right? There is no way you will know that from the bar plot. It will not tell you this. So that's, but also you will not know the distribution. Like you know the mean, great, but you don't know, was there any outliers? You don't know that. Bar plot will not tell you, right? So it's very high level, very, very pretty much high level. So we'll talk about how to convey the sample size through the bar plot, which is possible, and distribution and so on. But like typical simple bar plot, the one you see here on the right, will not tell you that information. Okay, but nevertheless, it's a powerful technique. It's good to know that, and that's a good start. Okay, so actually many commands will be just one line of code, so not so bad, I hope. So that's the command how to produce a bar plot. So you say SNC, and remember what is SNC? It's a Cborn, right? Because we have imported this, like, I mean, we have imported it this way. And then we say bar plot, because this is the function we would like to use, because we're using bar plot. So we say bar plot, then data equal to. So what is our data? Our data is name of the data frame, the one we have imported using Pandas, or the one we have used right now for Cborn. So that's, in our case, the name, the variable is categorical underscore data. That's the name. So now necessarily need to say what is X and what is Y, right? So X-axis will be day, right? X-axis will be day. So that's why you can see on the X-axis, you see Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is all the days we have got. Somehow they didn't record for Wednesday, for example. Fine. And then it should be categorical, right? It should be like measurement, not measurements. It should be categories, right? Categories are case controls, or in this case, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It cannot be numbers. It should be some categories. Now, and then actually the measurement is the tip, right? It's a measure. It's like a number. So we put tip here. Fine. Okay, great. So now you have got your data. So you can look here and already see some trends, right? So first of all, like the height of the bars, like of the blue, orange, green, and red, this is the mean, and then kind of like the bars, like vertical bar shows you the standard deviation in the data. Okay, so what you can see from here, right? Doesn't tell you much, but tell you something. So you see some trend, that there is a difference between weekend and the working days. Sure, probably you can see that, right? People pay more tips, they're more happy, I guess, on the weekend, so they're willing to give more money to the waiters. Yes, but actually Sunday is the highest. Okay, Saturday the second highest. Sure, and more or less Thursday and Friday there is a tiny, I guess, tiny difference, right? Okay, so that's already some information. But what you don't know from here, how many data points, how many people were eating on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday per day? You don't know that. Did you have outliers? What is somebody, a rich guy stopping by and giving, I don't know, $1,000 as the tip, and then lifting the median all the way up? That might be happening, but we don't know that. Data, I mean, this plot does not tell us this. Okay, so, but nevertheless, using one command, you can produce this kind of plot, which I think is good. Which I think it's a good plot to make. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so, all right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can we arrange the bars in increasing or decreasing rate of their values?
Yes, so this one. Yes, we can. Yeah, we can. I think we might. I will check if we have a command for that. Yeah, but definitely we can. And then that's a good question for TA. They can show you exactly how to do that. But
okay.
But typically, yeah, I mean, that's a good, that's a great question in general. So yeah, first of all, yeah. So I will check if we have this command. If not, we'll add it or TA. I mean, make sure to ask TA about that, but definitely the option. But I think there is a kind of more fundamental kind of part of the question you're asking. And the way it's about sorting. So typically you need to sort somehow things on the plot. It cannot be unsorted all the time. You cannot present things randomly sorted. I mean, randomly assigned, like on the Y, on the X-axis, they cannot be random. They can be sorted. So actually in this case, we are sorting by the day of the week, right? Already, not by the value, but by day, but just order how days are coming, right? But you can, as you said, you can sort also by tips, right? And that will flip. I guess you will get Friday first and Thursday, right? Sounds like looking carefully at the plot, and then Saturday and Sunday, right? Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Okay. So let's see more plots, I guess. Okay. So that's mean, right? Parameters of the bar plot. That's mean, and then this one is error bars, right? And then I think by default that's, let's see, by default it's standard deviation, I imagine, but I think you can change that. Okay, so another library which we'll use a little bit, I guess, to NumPy. So that's just to process large data sets. So let's see when we're going to use it. Okay, so the reason we need NumPy, because what about we don't like the mean? And the mean is skewed. right? Like again, if somebody comes and gives extraordinary, high tip, very high tip, that will change, that will affect the mean a lot, right? If everybody pays as a tip $1, but somebody pays 1,000, the mean will rise, will be around a couple of hundred, or like it will go very much up. So that's not good, because it's not that informative. So the better estimate might be the median. But in order to use the median, you need to use NumPy library. So what you need to do, you need to change the command you have seen before and just add this string, right? You need to say estimator is equal to np.median, right? And if you do that, now your plot will be median. The height of the bar will be the median rather than the mean. Okay, but to do that, if you're using any new library, you need to, oops, wait, sometimes it's switching, sorry about that. Okay, so, but then in order to do that, you need to import it, right? You need to say import NumPy as NP, right? You need to write that line and run it before using that library, if you need, right? Okay, so what we have learned so far, right? Bar plots have mean by default, but you can change that. But in order to do so, you need to use NumPy library as here, presented here. Okay, so I think it's good to know if you would like to use median. And if you do so, you need to say in your project report or paper or anywhere that it's really the median, because people would expect by default to be mean. So let's say in your caption of your figure or some description of the figure, you should say that's median, right? Rather than the mean, because I think people are assuming that's the mean. Okay. So if you would like to change it here, you can. So you need to import NumPy as NP, just type this line. Reuse, I would say, don't type from the beginning, reuse the previous line, just add this one, estimator is equal to np.median, right? And you will see things will change. So Friday, median is higher than Thursday. That was not the case before. Saturday and Sunday stays relatively the same, right? But things have changed. The median is different, obviously, than the mean, and then it's impacted our results, right? So you can produce those two different plots. Depends, are you using mean or are you using the median? Okay, so error bars. So by default,
One question.
Sure, please.
Yeah, but so by default, every plot created with Cborn shows the mean.
Yes, for the bar plot.
And we can only change that by NumPy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So yeah, so what about bar plots? Error bars, sorry, error bars. So error bars by default are the confidence intervals. For the error bars is 95% confidence interval. Can be changed with CI parameter. And I will not go that much in detail. So there's some bootstrapping happening and so on, but just to understand confidence intervals for the 95% confidence interval, meaning that it just shows, like how data, you cannot see the data points, but you can, based on this error bar, you can get some idea how data is distributed. Okay, so we'll not go much there. Yeah, instead of 95%, you can say 50% and so on, right? That will shrink the error bars. Okay, so I would say you have some flexibility. There are some defaults, as you can see, which is perfectly fine to use, but you also have the option, obviously, to change it and to adjust to your needs. Okay, so if we would like to be standard actually deviation, so just to be sure that we got it right. So by default, it's a confidence interval, 95% confidence interval, and then we can change it to be standard deviation, right? So and then to do that, we say CI is equal to SD standard deviation, and then the plot will change, as you can see, right? Standard deviation will be quite high, I would say, probably for those. So there's some differences, suggesting that there is some differences how people give tip, how people give money. Okay, so so again, default and bunch of interesting parameters from kind of statistical perspective. More you can use. Okay, so that was kind of statistical component. Now, what about kind of visual, right, aspect? So default is great, but can we improve it, right? Can we make it a little bit better? I think it's good to go, kind of like you can put that perhaps in your presentation, but maybe we can improve a little bit. So what we can do, we can put the cap, right? So you have this line, you can put the cap on the top, on the bottom, just to more clearly see what is that error bar. Sure, it's quite easy. You say cap size equal to dot, I mean, it should be like 0.2, but it's just dot 2, right? 0.2. So then that will be the size of those caps, right? Like either wide, very wide, narrow, and so on. Okay, so you can play with it. You can say 0.3 and see what will happen. Will be more wide, 0.1, less wide, more narrow, and so on. Right? That's a visual aspect, right? So each figure will have kind of like fundamental. Is it the, I mean, you will be asking yourself, is it the correct figure to use? Yes, no. Then you will ask, do I want to alter any parameters? For example, I don't like mean, I should really use median. Second question. And then when you're done, you say, can I improve it visually? So it will be easier for people to understand and to get information from the figure. So perhaps adding those caps will help and make it more visually appealing to people. Okay. Okay, so that was about bar plot. So any questions about the bar plot? Okay, so bar plot is good, but there is perhaps better ones, right? Sometimes. So box plot, right? So just to give you the definition of the box plot, is very popular way to visualize the distribution. And we have sometimes referred as the whisker plot, but more often, I guess, box plot. Conveys, so what is the advantage is conveys information about distribution relatively, not everything, but better than just error bar. Because basically you split the data, right? You have a median and then have quantiles, 25 percentile and 75 percentile. So basically if you order your data, right, you sort your data. Then you say, okay, median is easy. You just put the line here. Now you take 25%, which is the highest values, and you put another line, and then this will be Q3. And then you do the list, you know, the smallest 25 numbers. How many of them? Just put the line, and then you have this formula Q3 plus 1.5 and so on, right? So like, and then so basically it will tell you more. You can read on the Wikipedia more about like this if you never kind of came across the box plot, but basically, you know, like it gives you more information about distribution. Kind of can get idea what's going on, and then it's very, very popular technique. You have ability to display outliers, right? Like outliers, we mean just some values which are extremely high or extremely low. Basically, they're outside of the range of the box plot. You can display them, right? That's important because again, we want to know if there is a guy, remember, who the person who tipped, who gave a lot of money, right? Like, or everybody more or less equally gave the money. Now, we still don't know about sample size, right? We don't know how many points are inside. We don't, right? So that's still disadvantage. Okay. Now let's practice. You know, that was like, again, if you need to read more, read on Wikipedia. I'm sure there is a web page. I mean, the page of Wikipedia, Romanian or Russian or any language you would like to use. So I guess like will make you easy to understand. But okay, so let's get to kind of like to practice. So look at the command, right? It should be already familiar to you. It's quite similar. And then I think it's remarkable. It's quite similar to the one we have used for the bar plot. The only thing you need to change is the bar plot instead of box plot, and that's it, right? And things will work. So you say snc.boxplot data, again, your data frame and your x-axis and y-axis, day and the tip. Okay, the same story. Now, that's your results. So what is new information can you derive from the box plot comparable to the bar plot? So perhaps you can look at the median, but remember, bar plot theoretically also can give you the median. So that's not new. But you see some kind of distribution here. You can see that people tipped, let's say, the least distributed values when Friday. Somehow people tipping were closer to the median, but somehow it was a lot of people, you know, tipping very little, perhaps maybe saving for the weekend, right? So you can see that, right? You can see the median, but you can see heavily on Friday, there are very lot of small tips below the median. Somehow people decided to like a lot of people, but some people were tipping high, right? Then you see some outliers. So, you know, like somebody paid $10 tip only on Saturday, but not on Sunday, right? So on Sunday, it was generally higher, but it was no outliers on Sunday. Okay, so you can see that. So this is typically how you read the plot, right? You look, this is the purpose actually. So you can get an idea about the data, because how else, right? Probably this is like 1,000, maybe 10,000 people. How else can you derive those trends from the data? I think there is no other way than visualization to get some of those interesting insights. I think it's important insights to know about your data. So before you do any kind of analysis, let's say statistical analysis, anything, I think it's extremely important to look at your data and spend time looking at your data and try to provide some, you know, like some explanation, like what we do here. I mean, of course, it's easier because it's just the tips, so it's not that important, but like, of course, it's harder when you have phenotypes of the patients and like, let's say blood work or some like analysis results and so on, lab test and so on. But still, it's kind of the same, that you look and you try to explain why is that. And if you have severe outliers, something which sounds like almost cannot be true, you want to go back to your data, which is totally fine and appropriate, and examine that and say, okay, do I believe that observation? Maybe it was done in the lab or like during a day of a technician, which I would rather check. Yeah, like why not? But I think that's visualization kind of gives you the full picture. Okay. So what is outlier? So when we talk about the outside range of the box plot, we'll label as outlier. And then technically we can change the size of those plots, or we can even remove them, right? If we set them the size to be 0, they will disappear. So sometimes you need to include outliers, sometimes that makes the plot too noisy, right? So I think that's coming to the discussion. Do you want to be really high level? Or like, do you want to be on the low level, right? Like information. And sometimes depends what is the message you're trying to convey. For example, if you try to convey the message, there is a lot of outliers, like here, right? You try to convey the message that on Saturday, it actually was many people somehow tipping higher than normal for whatever reason. And then that's appropriate. But if you don't really want to convey that information particularly, you can remove the outlier. Maybe they're distracting people from getting other trends of the data, right? So you will have this technical possibility, right? So what you need to say to do that, so you will need just to say fly size, I mean this size, FLIER, whatever it stands for, size equal to 0, right? So you will make the outlier size to be 0. This is why they will be kind of removed, right? Because you will not see it. They will be still there kind of, but they will be just invisible. Okay, so I think it's more clean, right? Of the version of the box plot. Again, depends. All right, so let's see what else. Okay, so that was the basics of box plot. Now, let's bring some categories. Right, remember we talked about like males and females, you know, like a couple of times and so on. So the same here, you know, like when we did group by, it's actually a very similar concept, right? When we do group by, you want to see the values, like the mean for each group. So, but how we go beyond that? We want to see not just the mean, but actually the distribution, like the box plot itself, right? This is what we're gonna do. So we're gonna do 2 box plots kind of adjusted together in a sense that one will be for males and another for females. We're just curious, we are just generally curious to know what are the trends across the genders. Okay, so we keep no outliers. So if you look at this command, right, you can read it, right? So I think that's another skill you want to practice. You want to read the command, right? So SNC boxplot, fine, we're doing boxplot. Data, okay, still our data, categorical data. X equal to day, fine. Y equal to tip, sure. Size equal to 0, meaning we don't want to display outliers. You're okay with that? And then you say hue, and then you will say the name of the column, like the name of the column which you want to split. So in this case, that's biological sex, right? And so basically, you will have 2 box plots for each day of the week, right? One separately for males and females. So what you can see, I guess it's an interesting trend, not necessarily obvious. Like for example, on Thursday, males got more based on the median than the females, right? And then, but actually on Friday, females got more. Saturday again, males got more. So it's kind of like, not obvious that females were getting more tips than males, for example. And you can see kind of difference and distribution and so on, right? So, okay. So that's sometimes it's very nice to do, like I think it doesn't necessarily is too busy of the plot, like you can still read it, but it's more informative. Like if you compare the plot here versus versus here, I would argue that's more informative, right? Especially if you want to convey some interesting information about the genders, right? Okay. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So, right. Okay. So, any questions about the box plot?
The box plot, the box represents 50% of all the results.
Like inside, because it's 25.
Yeah, from 25 to 75, right?
Yeah. It's this 50% around the median, right? Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, but I would encourage, if you never work with Boxplot, somehow, sorry, I didn't put like more slides, which perhaps I should. So just like open Wikipedia and read Wikipedia. It's very kind of like clear, and you can even draw manually the Boxplot. Like take 10 data points and you can draw yourself the Boxplot. That's maybe a good exercise to do, just to make sure you understand. Okay. So visualization can be misleading. Like mean values can be inflated by outliers. Again, if somebody tips a lot one day, the mean will go up, but it will not necessarily be very representative. So we say the mean is inflated by outliers. Then sample size, meaning how many data points do you have, like how many people were on Thursday, Friday, and so on, sample size. And then as smaller the sample size is, as less reliable the results are. And then actually, if you will try to compute p-values, you will try to run some, if you run some t-test or anything like this, and you want to put p-values on the top, perhaps you will not be able to, perhaps you will not be able to obtain significant p-values if the sample size is small, right? If it's just like, but if as higher it is, as more significant kind of the p-values will be, right? So visualization in that sense is, if you don't say the sample size and you see the difference, you don't know, should you trust that or not? That's why p-values are important. So what can be the quick solution for that? Maybe we should show the data points, right? Like we should show every single, like in this case, customer of the restaurant, right? Like, why don't we do that? So I think it's possible. And that's I think we started with that, I think in the very first module 1, that it's a general trend to be transparent about your data. So I think it's a good idea. So something like that, right? So if that's your distribution, so every dot here is the some sample. That's overall sample, but every dot here will be some measurement, right? So you can see that there is actually 2 distribution, right? Somewhere on the top here and somewhere on the bottom here. But the box plot will, we'll squeeze it into one measurement. So that median maybe not necessarily that important, and that whiskey range also perhaps not that informative. So I think looking and giving readers or like audience a possibility to look directly at your data is extremely important, right? To avoid misinterpretation of the data by the audience due to limited visualization. Okay, so that's why we're going to talk about the strip plot, the plots which actually show the dots. So actually, and we will do that eventually, we'll combine, just because we will say there is no the best technique which can do visualization in the best way, we actually will combine. So we'll combine Boxplot, we'll just make it transparent, and we'll put dots inside. So you have sample size, you can kind of count the dots, but also you have Boxplot to get idea about the median, quantiles, and things like that. I think if you do dots, like it's strip plot, will clearly display sample size and distribution. And then it does not convey estimators like mean or median. That's the disadvantage. But again, by combining with the plot, Boxplot can convey that. Okay. So strip plot. So you're arranging the dots. So that's actually approximate. That's not precisely. Because, you know, like you need to arrange them kind of nicely. So if you run multiple times, they might shift slightly. Because the purpose is not actually precisely to display the dot, but kind of reveal the general trends. So they have random horizontal spread, because you also, you know, like you place them so that they are not overlap. Because if you drop them in the same line, that will be not that informative. So you want to spread them. But again, you need to do it with some random choice. Okay, so this is what we are talking about here. So this is the strip plot. So all you can see are the dots. That's it, right? Data points, nothing else. You don't know what is the median. You don't know what is like the anything, right? But you see that. And then you don't necessarily know precisely the sample size. But if I ask you, I'm sure perhaps you can tell me what is the smallest sample size, which particular day of the week, right? So it's Friday, right? If you look at it for you say the smallest sample size was on Friday, meaning that the very least people came on Friday for whatever reason. We're resting to have fun on the weekend, right? So, but you can see that. That's important. You don't know precisely. I mean, you can try, I guess, with some error. For example, here, you don't know, is it 2 dots or 3 dots? Perhaps 3, but again, can be a little bit. But overall, you can make a good guess, like Friday. I mean, let's try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So something like 19, 20, right? I imagine. So you can get like relatively, you know, you don't know precisely, maybe it was 18 somehow. I did a mistake, but that's, you can relatively, and there is a lot of the largest sample size. I don't know, actually Sunday or Saturday, but they're more or less similar. Maybe Saturday, right? Maybe. I mean, you can try. Okay. So, you know, like, so you can get a lot of information out of it. And how to do it? Again, the same command. That's why we love Cborn. The same command, no need to learn new commands. Just change Boxplot or whatever bar plot by strip plot, like this. That's it. And you got the plot like this. Not bad, right? With no new command, just replacing one word, completely different information, completely different plot. Okay, so we can play with what we call jitter. So jitter is the size of horizontal space you will have to put the dots. So as wider is it, as better you can see the dots, right? So you can count more precisely. Like probably on Friday, we can now check if I was wrong or correct, you know. But yeah, I mean, like, but what is disadvantages? You're taking more space, right? So if you have space, sure, that's a good idea. If you don't have space, you still need to make them narrow, especially if you have a lot of categories, right? In this case, we don't have many categories, but think about you have many. So, and then as narrow, yes, you make that narrow, as the chance the dots will overlap is higher, especially if they are the same. Because what will happen here, you can even try to find it. So those two, remember I asked around three, was it, I assume it was 4 dots, but in reality, there is a 3 dots. Can you see it here, right? So like if you look at the line equal, I would say 3, probably around. So there is 1, 2, 3, and there is unclear, is it 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 4, right? So because they overlap, it was not enough space to make them kind of, because they are, so as wider, as clear every dot is. And then, yeah, so basically by jitter parameter, you are changing the spread of the points horizontally, right? To make it more visually clear. Like that's it. There is no kind of science behind it, just like to make it visible. And then that's the parameter. Again, quite easy. I hope you're getting kind of the syntax, right? You just put the comma and add whatever the another parameter is. Jitter equal to 0.3, because we like them to spread. Try 5, try 9. That would be really spread. Okay. So I think, let's see. Okay, so what other means do we have to make? Because it's a big deal, right? When the points overlap, it's not that nice. You want to avoid it, but you limit it on space. What you do? You can actually change the color, like transparency of color. And perhaps even the points overlap it, but if it's transparent, at least partially transparent, that will be easier to look. So alpha parameter controls transparency. And can be used on actually not only here, but on another plots, you know, like you can do Boxplot to be transparent. So this is how it look like. I would say that's actually nice, right? So you can say alpha, the only difference here, you say alpha is equal to 0.6. So we got 60% of original color. Do you want 50? Just change 0.5, 0.4, 0.3. If you do, I guess, 0, it will be nothing, because it will be purely, I guess, you can try. It will be purely transparent. Okay, so I think it's better, right? I mean, you still see the points, but you see them better, I guess, especially if they overlap. So that's, you see where they overlap, because they are not transparent. I mean, they're more intense, the colors, right? You can distinguish the places where the points overlap versus they don't overlap, right? That's what helps. Okay. Now, how about we combine everything we know so far? Okay, so how about we combine the strip plot, categories, and then transparency, right? So we say, okay, how about we present this kind of interesting way, males versus females, but we really want to see the points, right? So we make them transparent, right? Alpha alpha equal to 0.6. We keep jitter to be white to see them. But now remember our friend hue, right? So like the parameter hue, which will split by biological sex. Okay, and instead of having two box plots, suddenly you will have the dots colored by males versus females. So I think it's quite nice. So let's see what's happening. I think that can really tell us about the data more than the box plots. So I think on Thursday it was more or less equal. You know, like one male got like a big tip, and it was no female getting that big tip, like around $70, but the rest was the same. Then on Friday, it was really little customers, and then females kind of were in the middle. One female got almost no tip for some reason, and nothing else special. So actually on Saturday, it was one male who got it was 4 customers served by the male who provided a lot of tip, right? You can see that. And the female, the highest was around like 6, 7 or something, and that's it. But inside, I guess more or less, it was interesting that males got this straight line. Can you see it here, right? So it was somehow many male waiters got $2 tips, somehow like very many of them for some reason, like it's precisely $2 for whatever reason. And what about Sunday? It actually was more males working. Maybe females couldn't join on Sunday, I don't know, right? But it's important, right? It's disproportionately more males than females working, I guess. The ratio, if you think about the ratio of people working, males versus females, it was the most skewed ratio on Sunday. I think it's interesting. So maybe females prioritize the life-work balance better, you know, like not work on the weekends. You know, like, so those kind of like things, like it's already the story, right? Like that's like, but this is, think about, that's like a simple data, like a toy example, but think about you looking at your data, like you can tell a lot by like just looking at this plot, right? So I think it's fascinating, you know, like how visualization can help to tell the story. Okay. What are the options? So let's see. So we also can separate the points using the dodge parameter, and we will kind of separate them. And this is how it will look like. Okay, so there are usually probably I prefer hue. I mean, so this is the hue I think is better, but you know, like, but you can kind of force them to be on this separately, kind of similar to box plots. They will not overlap, right? Here you can see males and females dots are overlapping, but not here. They're forcing to be. I mean, I think it's okay. You know, like it's also interesting. Okay, but just another way to visualize. Okay, so if you like that more than the previous one, you just need to say dodge equal to true. Okay, just a parameter, and you will see. And then actually you play. You know, when you do your real visualization, I mean, when you do visualization of your data, you just play with the parameters.
Sorry, this dodge is used together with hue. Or I can
Oh,
use,
yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, you're still using hue. So hue by default will mix them together, right? But if you want hue to force to separate them, right, use dodge. That's a great point. Yeah, use them together. Okay, so you can actually also change the marker like shape. It was a dot, you know, the circle, sorry, but you can do like triangle or like do the cap, you know, like anything you would like to do. And in this case, if you do that, then it will be like this, right? Okay, I'm not sure. Like if you like that, please do that. So we'll not go much into, and then you can say the size. Actually, that's another important thing. You can say the size of the circle or the size in this case of this cap, right? So in this case, you know, like I mean, is it better? Not sure, you know, like, but it's like, you know, makes sense. I mean, sometimes it's useful. So we'll not go much more into like, you know, like let's say different marker size and things like that. If you want to kind of read about that, you can, about strip plot. But I think that's very much what we covered are essentials. Okay, so I think we'll stop here. So I think TA will arrive like in a couple of minutes if they did not do so yet. And that's, I think we covered like quite a good fraction of the material already. So, you know, like if you have a question, feel free to ask now, if you have any.
I understand, maybe I misunderstood. So I know that pie charts are in fact criticized a lot, and in Cborn package there is even no option for producing a pie chart.
Yeah, exactly. Somehow they took it to extreme. I mean, my opinion is pie charts are okay as soon as you don't have tiny categories. Let's say you have 3 categories, like you know, 30%, 20%, and 50%. That's fine. I think pie chart in that case is a good way to visualize it. But if you have 50 categories and many of them 1%, pie chart will become a disaster, basically, right? And especially, I think a bad tone, or like, you know, like to do this, like what is called 3D pie chart, things like that. So they are kind of people, I mean, that's not a good kind of like style. I mean, it's not necessarily bad for science, you know, like it's not that you're not accurate, but like in terms of style. So yeah, so somehow Cborn decided to take it to the very extreme and not let have pie charts at all. So instead, you can have a bar plot where every bar will be the percentage, right?
I see, thank you.
Sure.
So developers decided,
yeah, they don't like
an extreme decision. To produce like ugly plots using their package, they decided just to remove it.
To avoid it completely, so people don't misuse it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but I think you will have them in the matplotlib. I think in matplotlib, you have the option to do pie charts. Any other questions? Okay, so again, so we have covered a good fraction of the material, you know, like I hope you will have time with TAs to practice it. But again, play with, I think it should be less complex than the pandas, I hope. The commands are short and you're getting like nice plots, you know, like, so you can play with the parameters, you know, like while you're practicing. You can see, like, you know, be curious, try and change the parameters and see what will be the effect of changing that, right? On the how things are visualized, and decide for yourself which plot you think is the most effective to visualize this kind of data. Okay, so any last minute questions? We discussed how we can show data points, right? So we discussed every type of the plot, and we discussed like why I mean, what are the advantages and disadvantages of different types of the plots? And obviously, all of them comes with advantages and disadvantages, right? So there's no kind of universal one, like silver bullet, which will be the best for each. So what we will do eventually, we'll combine them. But before we do that, let's discuss one more type of the plot. I think that's might be less familiar to you because it's newer, I guess. It's more used by computational community, I imagine. Okay, so it's violent plot, right? So why it's violent? Because it looks like violent, I guess, right? If you look. So, and then you just want to show the distribution, right? You want to show the distribution this way. Okay, so there's some function. So it's not a exact distribution, but it's rather your approximation, right? You do approximation of the existing distribution. Okay. So what are the advantages of the violent plot? So I would say it's more informative than the plain box plot. So why? Because it shows precisely the distribution, right? So remember, if you have like, let's say 2 clusters, you know, like 2 clusters, so the box plot will not capture this, but like violent plot, you will really see that there is a lot of data points here and there are a lot of data points in other points. So it's like, it's quite nicely shows you exactly what is the data. So, and then it shows the distribution. I guess that's the main advantage. Shows you the full distribution of the data. All right. So again, the command is quite simple. So for the visualization part, as you can see, all the commands are quite simple, right? So all you need to change the name, right? So remember, you did bar plot, box plot, strip plot, and now violent plot, right? So like just 4 keywords so far, but the syntax is exactly the same. So we say violent plot. So we just replace, we take the previous command and we replace whatever was before by violent plot. Okay, that's all you need to do. So now if you do that, that will be the results of, those will be the results, like that will be the results of visualization, right? So what you can see, so it kind of gives you new insights, I imagine, right, about the data. So you can see precisely, you know, like what is the distribution. Okay. So what, and then I also another parameter, which I think is less used. Somehow we are not using that often, but I think it's quite nice one, that you can show the relative sample size, right? So remember, sample size is the number of data points in that particular category, like number of data points on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And remember, right, when we looked at the strip plot, when we looked at the data points, we actually observe that it was the least number of data points on Friday. Remember that? Okay. So can we show this here? So there is no possibility to show absolute sample size, right? So people know precisely, but you can show relative. And there is an option for that. So it's called scale equal count right here. Scale equal count. And then it will basically the width of the plot will be the relative sample size. So for example, you can see that on Friday, that's the most narrow. That's the most narrow on Friday, right? Meaning that the smallest sample size is on Friday. And then Saturday is more wide. I think that's the widest, or similar as Sunday. And Thursday is in kind of in between Friday and Saturday, let's say. Right, so you don't know exactly like absolute number for the sample size, but you can see kind of relative. Okay, so if that you think what you need, you know, like you would like to that's important for audience. I think like when you decide on those kind of things, I think you would like to ask this kind of question yourself. Is it important for the audience I'm presenting the results to know that Friday was less number of smaller sample size on Friday comparable to other, for example, right? Is it important to know, or they will not care, right? I think that's the question you would like to ask. So if that's important for them to know for whatever reason, you can use this option, for example, right? So but if you think that will confuse them, or it will make them harder to, let's say, get the main point, you know, like read the main message you're trying to deliver by this plot. So perhaps you should not do that, right? Okay. Okay, so we can look to see what, there's a couple of adjustments we can do about violent plot. So one box is actually by default. So if you look carefully, actually, which I didn't mention, so if you look carefully inside the violent plot, so you can see that there is a box plot inside by itself. I mean, it's relatively small, but it's there. And you see like a white dot, that's your median, right? In the box plot. Okay, so that's default. So you can show quantiles, like similar what you have in the box plot, but you rather show just the lines. You don't want to show box plot. You can show actually points, individual points, or you can say none, like nothing inside the violent plot. Okay, let's try a couple of those options. So one, if we say, and then you need to use this parameter, right? Inner equal to quantile. Or okay. And then, so yeah, so that will be the median, and then 50% range will be here. Okay, so that, if you like this kind of option for whatever reason, that's fine. You can use it. All right, so now points. So you can insert data points. And that's fine, right? So you can see data points, but in my opinion, it's not that informative. And the reason actually why it's not, because all the data points are on the single line, right? As you can see. So they're really overlapping. It's very hard to know, for example, I mean, you probably that's sufficient to understand that the Friday have the smallest sample size, perhaps. But I would say it's hard to know like that Thursday is less than Sunday, as we know, right? We know that the Thursday sample size is smaller than Sunday, but from here I would say hard to understand. And the reason it's hard because if you look on Thursday, for example, and you look at the violent plot, you can see that there is a lot of data points on around 2, right? That's why kind of like the shape goes like this, right? Because there is so many data points around 2. So when you look at the data points themselves, I mean, they will be all overlapping. So you would not be able to count them. So that's why we do jitter. Remember jitter we did before? So we distribute them horizontally so that you can see. Putting them everyone on the same line, that's probably not the best idea. But this is how it's done in violent plot. Okay. And then another thing, I think coming back, so how about splitting by category? So we have another category we're interested to see. And remember, we're interested to see males versus females. So very similar what we were doing for other types of the plot. So we can also do for the violent plot, right? Okay, so I think decent, right? It's decent, and then perhaps better than the box plot, I would say. Not sure if it's better than, let's say, jitter, right? Showing individual data points. All right, and then how to do that? Exactly as we did many times, right? Hue is equal to sex here, right? That's how you do it. All right. Let's see. Actually, there is a quite nice option, and I think that's, I think it's unique about violent plot. So the reason it's unique, so if you look carefully, let's go back here. If you look carefully at the violent plot, it's actually symmetrical, obviously, right? So if you divide it in half, if you draw the line, vertical line, and divide it in half, actually half is enough, right? Like if you look at the left from the box plot, like this half, probably like here, right? If you look at just the shape on the left, that will be enough because shape on the right is exactly the same, right? So why would you waste space? So this is what exactly the idea. So we can actually draw one violent plot for both males and females, but actually use the left for males to draw the shape for males, and then the right to draw the distribution for females. I think it's a great idea, right? It saves space. You don't need to kind of duplicate the information. And I think it's quite conveyed quite nicely because you can kind of contrast them. Looking at the individual violin plot, you can contrast males and females and kind of really derive what's going on. Okay, so I think that's a good one. So for that, you just need to say split is true, right? So if you say so, that will be kind of the type of the plot you will get. Okay, so I think that's quite unique and quite nice. Sometimes I think it saves space and then quite nicely tells you what's going on. Okay, so I think it was, in the beginning was a question about ordering. Very good question. So I think ordering is extremely crucial, and I think I'm always surprised that for many students, it's kind of hard to understand that, you know, like ordering is essential because you cannot plot elements not being ordered, right? So you should order them somehow by values, or in our case, actually, there is some ordering. And actually the ordering is by day of the weeks, right? There is ordering. So there is always should be like, should not be random usually, you know, like I mean, sometimes probably you cannot avoid it, but should be some order. So if you cannot, if those values, let's say on the x-axis, they don't have meaningful ordering, I don't know, names of people, for example, right? It's kind of odd to order people. So then, I mean, you can order them, let's say by alphabet. But if you say there is no really ordering, then you can order by the value of the y-axis, right? So, but the idea is should be always ordering. Okay. Okay, so by default we infer by data, you know, like from the data. So I think alphabetically or by value. And I think when you do your, let's say, report or like project or whatever you do, then you would like to keep consistent ordering, right? So sometimes, you know, like you want to define a certain order and keep it across, like what we actually did for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We keep the same order, right? Imagine we would flip them. That will be confusing, I guess, right? So, but keeping the same order is essential. And then we'll talk about how to do that, right? How to define it once and basically maintain across the entire analysis. Okay. So we will just say, we'll define the list and, you know, and we kind of like briefly said what is the list, but the list is just the number. I mean, the list is just elements being grouped together, right, in a certain variable. And you can do many operations with that, but the point is that we just say the order, right? We say order equal to, and then the elements here. So we say we want actually somehow, for whatever reasons, we want Friday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? Rather than kind of normal order. Sure. And this is what we do, right? So we write the same or very similar command. And the only difference, we say order is equal to, right? And the order will change. So now you will have, you know, like you will have what? Friday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. Great. So if that's the case, you can do it. So you have technical means to do it. Okay, so actually, if you will do it often, it's not that convenient, right, to type this list all the time, right? So rather, it's better to define externally the variable, the list, and say, okay, I will define a variable called x_order equal to, and kind of list this order, and you know, like that's it, you have a variable. So anytime you would like to use this order, you can use it because it's defined, right? So you can say order is equal to x_order. And actually, whatever you call it, you know, in this case, we call it x_order, but can be anything. Okay, so great. So you can reuse it. So that order will be, you know, like, and this is how you do it. I would say you can do it separately in a separate block. You can define this variable, let's say, and then that's it. You can use it as many times as you would like to use it. Okay, so I think that's useful. Like again, if you want to maintain different order from the default. Okay. Any questions so far?
A question about while and plot.
Sure.
I'm not exactly understand. They are not always symmetrical. Why is they symmetrical?
No, but I mean like here, right?
Yeah, the dots will be so inside.
No,
yes,
no, forget about the dot. Like here, right?
Yes, they are beautiful, symmetrical. Can they be asymmetrical?
No, I don't.
They,
I mean, I think that's the definition. I mean, that
mhm.
left should be, it's kind of redundant. I think it's done for beauty in some sense. So it's redundant. Left, kind of left line and the right line are always symmetrical.
So where is the widest part? Here I expect to find the mode. Yes, the highest frequency of a specific value. Yes.
Yeah, like as wide they go.
Like some.
Yeah.
So on a Thursday, yes, the highest value would be 2.
Right.
The most frequent value would be
Exactly.
2. That is why here we have this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of similar if you typically people plot distribution. I mean, this is just done like vertically, but people do horizontally, right? The distribution more traditional, right? When you draw distribution, you rotate that 90 degrees, right? That will be like traditional way of plotting distributions.
Yes.
Yeah, but here we just do it vertically, and we also do this symmetry, so that is like
yes, because I start looking at the symmetry in it, and I'm expecting why it's so ideally symmetrical.
Yeah, because it's redundant. That's redundant. It's redundant. That's why we say, okay, we can use it like here. That's why we said, okay, we can actually throw. I mean,
here is not exactly symmetrical.
I mean, here, of course, here is not just because we actually did it intentionally, because now left is males and right is females.
That's like female.
Yeah, but this is like exactly the reason they are not, because they are different distributions, right? And then this is exactly what we said. We said, oh, that's redundancy. So let's use it. Like why do we need both parts? Let's say some information about males by left and females by, I mean, right part will tell about females. Yeah.
I see. Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's see what is next. Okay, so how about the palette, right? So the colors. Colors are extremely important. It's another thing, you want to maintain the same colors. Like if you devote like Thursday by red color, you want to maintain it across the entire analysis or whatever, the entire report, so people are not confused. And then in general, I think colors are important. So I would encourage you in general, spend time for colors, like not add like toxic colors or like something not visually or like appealing or aesthetically appealing, like I think colors are crucial. And then personally, I believe spending time to define a good colors, which are kind of like, like nice to understand. Okay, so we'll define the palette using the dictionary data structure, and then we will use it once, right? So again, kind of a reminder about the dictionary. So we will just say that, I mean, I guess like, let's see the example. Okay, we have it here. Okay, so we'll have the keys and the values, right? The keys will be the elements, right? Say Thursday, Friday, and so on. So we want to have one-to-one relationship with some values. And the values will be the colors. In other words, we would like color to correspond to one day. We don't want that the color to be, at least in normal settings, we don't want color to correspond to several days, right? We don't want that, because like that's not the purpose. But the purpose is every day every day of the week to have a distinct color. This is what we are trying to do here, right? So we say keys will be whatever we have, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and they will correspond to purple, orange, brown, and gray, right? One by one, right? So purple will be Thursday, orange will be Friday, and so on, right? That's a dictionary. So keys and the values. So this is how we define the dictionary. So first of all, we need to give a name, right? So in this case, we said, And the name can be anything, right? Again, that's a variable, so you can choose. So we say color underscore dictionary. That's our name. Equal to, so now we define it in the following way. And that should be like strictly followed, because that's like the syntax of the Python. So you say dictionary, parentheses, curl braces here, but basically just repeating what is the structure. So when you define you just need to change those elements, like Thursday, maybe you have something else, keys, and then values, which are colors. Let's say you say purple, orange, brown, gray, and so on. Okay, so, and then if you need more, like in this case, we got 4, but let's say you got 5, you just put comma right here before curl braces, right? Like right here, put comma and put like another element, Sunday. Let's say Monday in the single quotes, because that's a string, and then semicolon, and then gray. Okay, so this is how you do it, right? So in the colors, you have a lot of default colors. So I think will have some number for, some colors, typical colors for you, but those are typical colors. And there is different versions of the Python, and there is quite a bit of colors, and there is different palettes you can use. If it's not enough, there are always more. Okay, so but we'll go with the basic, like very basic colors. All right, so if we decide to do that, right? So we define a new block of code and we write our dictionary right here. And if we do so, that's it. Meaning if we run this piece of code of this block, better say block of the code, and no errors appears, meaning that everything went smoothly, meaning that we have a variable we can use, right? So what we say when we write the code for the bar plot, in this case, we just say palette is equal to color underscore dictionary. This is what, so then we are using the new palette. Okay, so I think the colors are quite nice. Probably, you can play with that and see which color works the best for you. Okay.
Isn't the dictionary like when we declarated the color dict to be equal to dict and all the dictionary we just said? Isn't it not necessary to say dict equal to dict?
I see. Yeah, probably. Actually, is it like I forgot. Is it the new Python which doesn't? I think it also depends Python 2 or Python 3 or both. Yeah, you're saying if you remove the dict.
Yeah, it just works. Just try it. Yeah.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, maybe it's maybe it assumes that.
In the first lesson about Python, we declared dictionaries without the dict.
I see. Yeah. I think it's it's possible. It's just less. I thought it will be less confusing that you see the dict word. Yeah, but there are. So in other words, there are few possibilities how you can write the code, right? Sometimes you can avoid certain keywords. Yeah. So there is alternative way to write it. Yeah, if you remove the dict, it will still work. Yeah, great point. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so let's see. So what about ordering plot elements? So for example, if we plot males versus females here, right? So now we say X is equal to sex, right here. So it will be just males and females on the X-axis. And we keep tip to be on the Y-axis. And then we say, okay, we know the order we would like, right? So which we defined prior, right? Remember that order, Friday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday instead of normal one. So we say hue order is equal to X underscore order. And the hue we want to split by day, right? So if you do that, so that's kind of the plot you will get, right? So you're using the hue, meaning splitting by males and females. Sure. But also you say, I want a specific order, right? I want a specific order for days. I want days to be grouped, ordered in a specific way. like Friday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday instead of normal way, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, so if that's the case, you can do it, right? So you can you have queue order, which can order elements in the way you would like them to be ordered. Okay, okay, so I think now let's talk kind of about combining, and I think that's the most powerful thing you will get out of this module in terms of visualization. And I think that's, to me, state of the art of doing things. Making, combining, because as we discussed, none of the plots is ideal, obviously, and they come with certain advantages and disadvantages. So why don't we combine them and make kind of ideal plot, or at least the best we can do? Okay, so that's kind of will be the best plot you will be able to do out of this module. So that's a bar plot and the strip plot being combined, right? So why it's important? So it's important because it's nice, and I mean, not just nice, but it's important to show data points, but also it's useful for people to know the mean, for example, right? And kind of see the bar plot because they're traditionally used to that. So we will be learning how to draw this kind of plots. Okay, so actually it's quite simple. You don't need to know much new information. And I think that's what is nice. So you just combine what you know. So you know how to do bar plot already, right? Okay, so you can do that. The only thing you need to change, you need to make it transparent, right? Because if it's not transparent, you will not see the data points, but that's the point. You want to see the data points. So you say color inside the bar plot to be white. Sure, there is a parameter for that. You say face color equal to white. So that's, and then you say age color equal to black, right? So you want to have a kind of on the perimeter, you want to have a line and inside to be white. So those are two parameters, age color equal to black and face color equal to white. Okay, the rest is the same. Okay, so if you run just this command, you will get this output. But what you do in the same block of code, you run another one. So you overlap, right? You got one plot and you overlap with another one. That's how you get this plot, right? So now you say, I will just do the strip plot, and actually very standard one, no modification at all, as you can see, right? That's a typical strip plot. So if you do that, you will get this kind of plot on the bottom, right? Like here. Okay, that's a good start, right? So we will now discuss how to make it a little bit better and how to combine, let's say, maybe box plots and so on. But that's the basic idea, right? We draw one plot and put another one on the top. Okay, so yeah, so that will be this is how your code block will look like, right? Two commands. All right. So a couple of things we can improve, right? Remember, like first attempt, I think as the first attempt, it's quite good, but there is some room for improvement. So what is that? So we can make error bars more visible. And to do that, remember that parameter cap size, basically this vertical line, horizontal line, like which shows you error bar. Sure. So you can put it here, cap size equal to 0.3. Okay. But also, probably the dots are too bright, right? And then you don't really see, again, looking here, you don't see really the error bars, aren't you, right? So it's hard to see. So what can we do? I mean, they're already solid, right? They're black color. You cannot make them like the error bars more visible. But instead, maybe you can make the data points color more transparent. So this is what we are doing here. We say alpha is equal to 0.5, meaning it's 50% of the brightness, right? So we kind of, remove the accent from the dots and put it kind of naturally back to the error bars. Okay, so now I would say you still do see the data points, great. But now you see quite nicely the error bars due to cap size, I would say, because there is a horizontal bars here, but also because the data points are 50% of original color. They're 50% transparent. Okay, so I think that's much better. And that, I would say that's already a decent plot, right? That's a decent plot to report, right? Or like to put in your report or anything. Okay, so we can actually do exactly the same thing for the box plot with the only one difference, right? If you look at those two commands, let's say the second command, when you do the strip plot, it's exactly the same. So here, the only difference, we say we don't want outliers, right? And then for the box plot, obviously, right? Because actually, if we put outliers in the box plot, they will overlap with those data points here. So it will be not nice. But also we say that we kind of do them, that we do the box plot to be white inside, and we'll have black colors kind of shaping the box plot. So that's what we say. We define a dictionary where basically we say this code 1110, that will, I think, means that we do face color to be 0, but the rest of the elements to be kind of black lines. Okay, so by using those two commands, right, you are getting these results, right? Again, you're drawing the box plot, which is white inside and have the black color lines, black lines. And then on the top, you put the data points, which are 50% transparent. And I think, again, I think you can see, as a result, you can see quite nicely box plot, but also you can see the data points. Okay, so I think that's, and we'll talk a little bit more how to improve it, you know, like how to make it a little bit more sharp in the very end. But I think fundamentally that the furthest we can go, we will go with the box plot and bar plots and data points, you know, like, and I think that's quite state of the art. Not everybody in the US and like in the good universities like doing that. It's still, but it's required, as I mentioned. Many journals are taking that extremely serious. So if you don't do data points, they will not accept your paper, things like that. So that becomes like a big trend, and I think for a reason. I think box plot itself, as we discussed, is not that informative as adding the data points. So you're not sacrificing, right? You're not sacrificing anything from the box plot because you can see it clearly, but you're adding extra information, which can be useful. All right. Any questions about?
Yes, excuse me, I
Sure.
think I missed. What does it mean 1110? This
Yeah,
is
so that just
colors.
means that, yeah, that just means how you want to color it, right? So inside you want to be white. I think that's why it's saying 0. But you also want all the elements, and I think there are 3 of them, you know, like all the elements of the box plot to be black lines. So that's what it means. So you can use, yeah, you can just use it.
This is for 4 elements in one box
just
plot,
like,
not
you know,
for 4 days. Yes.
No. It's just like every box plot. I think 3 elements actually. Like, yeah, like 3 ones. You know, like I think there are like a square, then there is lines. Anyway, so I think that what you're saying is that you want box plot inside to be white, not colored, but also you want all the shape, the entire shape of the box plot to be like a black line. So this is what you're saying.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, so let's talk about like slightly different things. So that will be relational plots. So we would like to compare the relationship between 2 variables, right? So we have, let's say, age and obesity, age and blood pressure, whatever, right? So those are 2 variables we would like to say, okay, are they correlated, right? Like, what is the relationship between them? And then actually, typically, x's are made of those 2 variables, right? X-axis, let's say, will be age, and y-axis to be blood pressure. Sure, right? It will kind of show you what's going on. Is there like a relationship? Okay, so we'll use what is called MPG dataset. I think that's miles per gallon. So this is how efficiency of the cars is measured in US. How many miles can you go on 1 gallon? And I think gallon is like what, 3.5 liters or something like this of the gas, of the fuel the cars are using. Okay, so this will be our data set, right? So we'll load the data set similar what we did for the box plots and bar plots, right? So we'll say snc.load dataset, and that's the name, MPG. And this is how it will look like. So again, if you're working with your data, you will do something similar, but you will use Pandas to download your data. Okay, so that's the measure, miles per gallon, I think number of cylinders, whatever the information there is in the car, horsepower, and so on, weight, acceleration, model, origin, where it was produced. I think the name, we can even have the name. Okay, so that's the data we are working with. Okay, so we will talk about line plots. So line plots can be used to compare means or medians over the span of x-axis, and will not tell you the distribution and will not tell you the sample size. So to make the line plot, we'll say this, we'll say line plot, we'll say SNC as usually, right? Because it's Cborn. So far, the plots we're doing, they are all Cborn. So we'll say SNC dot line plot, and we'll say data equal to the name, relational data. This is the name of our data frame we're using. And we'll say we want to have on the x-axis the model year, right? When the car is produced. That will be our x-axis, and the y, like how many miles per gallon the car can go. So let's see. Okay. So this is the line plot. So right, model year. So we have the cars from 17 to 82. This is our data. And here on miles per gallon, we see that it goes up, which is good, right? You can go more miles on the same quantity of gas, and meaning that the car are more efficient, right? Which makes sense. So you kind of examine, okay, that makes sense. Things should go up. There is some interesting kind of ups and downs, but overall the trend is up. So by default, you see some bend, like there is a line here, but there is some bend around the line. So, and then this is how it's done by default. And if you want to change that, if you want to kind of switch to error bars, like very similar to the bar plot, right? Then this is how it will look like. So what you need to do, you need to change error, ERR underscore style, like error style, to be bars, rather than kind of the bend around it. Okay. Does it look better? Maybe, but maybe the original was better, but that's a possibility. And actually here, let's see, do I have it? Yeah, so actually, I'm not that convinced, for example, in this particular case, the line plot is actually better than the bar plot. Maybe the bar plot is as good, right? So they're kind of a little bit interchangeable, right? Sometimes at least, right? So this is what we produce with the line plot, but actually we can do that with what we learned, right? We can do that as the bar plot, or actually just the data points, or as the box plot or violin plot. And that will be our syntax for whatever the plot, bar, strip, the box, or violin. Whatever the plot, we say X to be model year and Y to be MPG. Okay. So yeah, so it depends if you like that. I think that might be more clearly conveying kind of the trend, right? Here it's a little bit hard to know what is exactly the trend, because you need to pay attention to the median, right? And the same here, it's less evident that there is a kind of a positive trend. So, but it depends, like sometimes, so it depends on the data, I guess, right? So in this case, probably line plots is better because it tells you the trend.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. So why 1 year here contains a few values?
Yeah, because you have a lot of cars in that year, right? So line plots gives you the mean, right?
So we have here another variable, yes, because we don't see
we have
here...
a lot of cars. Yeah, we have a lot of cars being at the same year, right? Like actually as many, you can clearly see that from the tree plot, right? Like many cars here and many cars here and so on. That's the number data points we have, right? This is what we are based our, so we are computing against the mean here. So it's 17.5. So like something here, right? Makes sense. Somewhere here, there is a mean. Yeah, actually here, 17.5, that's the mean and so on, right? So I think another reason, yeah, another difference, which is really important. So you can see here the, is it by default like this? Yeah, so there's a little bit different settings. So you can see here that the y-axis starts with 15 and we are starting here with 0, right, everywhere. So that's a little bit, makes it look different, right? So that's also important. That's something you would like to pay attention when you're producing the plots for your report in J or like the project, that you would like probably consistency. If there is a plot starting with 0, probably every other plot need to start with 0, because otherwise it's confusing. I was confused actually. I forgot about that. So I was confused for a second, like why it's so low here and why it's higher here. But the reason actually, because it starts with 15 here, but 0 here. So I think the good practice is across the entire project or report or like analysis, you would like the plots to start with like consistently. If it's 15, sure, everything needs to be 15. But if it's 0, you know, like then everything needs to be 0. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so so we can have some other options. So we can do hue, and then we can like split, right? So we can say, you know, like blue in this case. Actually, I forgot what is that signal time point. So anyway, so there's a plot, and then you just split into 2 lines, right? So one line, we saw one line, but you can do split by categories. Okay. Oh, we don't have examples. Okay, so maybe the TAs will have examples that, but the idea is, yeah, you want to split, let's say here, actually, I will ask TA, I think, I'm pretty sure they have, but if not, I will ask them to do. So basically, probably here would be nice to split by, let's say the data, for example, by origin, right? It would be nice to split that line, let's say US versus Japan versus Europe and so on, right? To see how trend is across the continents, for example, right? So that will be using hue. So I think TAs will have that example. If not, we'll ask them to do that. Okay, so that's pretty much about line plots, right? There is, I think it's just, sometimes it's nice, and then it's always possible to replace them because the data is discrete, right? It's per year in this case. So if its data is discrete like that, it's possible to replace them by bar plots or box plot and things like that. And but depends. Sometimes line plots are more effective or less effective than other types of visualization. Okay. So,
I'm sorry, just one precision. So this line plot we use only to show mean or median over time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
we do not show a value over time.
No, but we show
I mean, no. Yes, mean and median. It's also. Yes, it's also value, but
I mean,
when we calculate the mean, we calculated it for a sample.
Yeah,
yes?
Exactly. Yeah,
no, and we can calculate like confidence intervals. Yes, and to put it here, but so line plot is used to show this mean or median. Like that, because I noticed very often people use line plot to show a specific value, for example, a count. So number of births in a year, for example.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine. Yeah, I mean,
it's also fine. Yes,
yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, whatever the measurement, right? Like whatever the summary statistics. Right. In this case, that's a median or mean, or another summary statistics will be count, maybe minimum. Why not? Maybe maximum. Right. For example, I mean, but like I mean, yeah, I think you're showing whatever the summary statistics you would like to plot. Right. Which is, and behind that, there is a lot of like, this is the raw data essentially, right? If you look at the plot, there is the raw data. Clear. So anyhow, you would like to summarize it. Mean, fine. Maybe the max. that will be like this, you know, the very top data points. Why not? The minimum, sure. Like anything, like any summary statistics. Count, yeah, sure, count sample size, essentially. So, for example, why would you show sample size here? Just to show how the data is, right? Like, no, like I think it's like, in general, I think good practice is to use visualization not only to report the final results, I would say, but also do QC, quality control of the data. So one quality control of the data can be to know sample size per year to make sure things are more or less consistent. You don't have like years with no data, for example, right? And then if you have really, like in this case, you can count perhaps, right? Or like visually understand that more or less they have equal number of data points, but think about you have 100 years and you have thousands data points, so you will not be able to count. So perhaps you can show by line plot sample size per year and identify the years which are very poor in data points. And if they are below some threshold, you can drop them, for example, or do something about that, right? So I think one very important thing you can use visualization not only to report final product or like put in your presentations and reports, but also for yourself to do kind of QC, quality controls, right?
Yes, I see. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, so I think that's all about line plot. So ask TA to show you to split, you know, like how about ask TA to, and then we'll add that to the slides actually. So ask TA, so we didn't see the line plot here overall, right? But how about ask them to split by country, by this, oops, what is that? By this, right? Ask them to split by origin, by this column. So you will have, I think there's three, like a US, at least in US, we have three types, like US, Japan, and Europe, more or less. I think that could be here. So then you will see three lines instead of one, okay? So that will be kind of like splitting by categories. So if you're interested, you can ask TA, they will do it for you and we can add it to the slides. Okay, so that's all about line plot. So another type of the plot, that's scatter plot, also extremely popular, and we are using that very, very often. And I think it's the same. It's visualize the relationship between two numerical variables, and the same story. Something will be on the X and something will be on the Y. In this case, just because we're showing the data points, actually we're clearly displaying sample size, right? So by looking at the plot, we'll know sample size. But, so it's always like a sacrifice, as you can see. If you showed sample size, then, oops, we are not doing estimators, like mean or median, right? Nothing like that. We just show the data points. Okay. So what could be the simple one? So you say scatter plot right here, SNC equal to scatter plot. And you say on the x-axis, I want to have the weight, how many kilograms or pounds the car is weights, and y to be, again, this miles per gallon, how effective is it? Okay, and we just plot everything, right? So that's a scatter plot. I think it's very effective. So what you can see from here, so first of all, you can see the range. If you look at the x-axis, you can see, okay, the weight varies from, and actually, I would say that here, I mean, if you think about this figure to be final, you need to have weight, and then in parentheses, you need to say what? Kilograms, pounds, or like whatever, like what other measurements, right? So that's for the final project, I mean, for the final product you're producing, it's always important to mention the units. Okay, so I assume that's pound because that's in US. So, okay, so like 1,500 pounds and 5,000 pounds, right? That's kind of the range. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, so we kind of see the reverse trend, right? Which obviously as the car weighs more, as less effective the car is. Let's say if the car is extremely heavy, like a 5,000 pounds, then it can only go around like what, 10, 15, right? Even like less than 15, let's say, miles for 1 gallon. So you put 1 gallon in the car and only 15 miles. Now, if the car is light, it's right. So like then generally it can go more up to 45, right? So that's what you can learn from this plot, just looking at the plot. What else? You can clearly see sample size. What is the sample size I'm dealing with? I mean, probably can make, I mean, it's hard actually to make a guess, like what, 500 data points? So that's my guess, but you can see, I mean, you can kind of see more or less like how many data points you're dealing with. Okay, so that's all the scatter plot does. It kind of tells you the relationship, right? If there is a trend, and in this case, I would say, yes, there is a trend. So what you can do on the top, you say, okay, I see the trend. So you can go and calculate and compute correlation, for example, right? So you can compute correlation and say, you know, like there is a high correlation and you compute the p-value, meaning is it true, right? Do you have enough? In this case, I would say probably you will have a significant p-value just because you have a lot of data points, and correlation will be like what, maybe 70%. I'm just making the guess, but we can compute. I mean, I think will not have statistical component because that was a little bit too much for this class, but theoretically, yeah, you can compute correlation, and that will be kind of a formal way to quantify, right? But I think just like visually, you can see and conclude, and that audience can conclude if there is a trend or not. Okay, so can we bring a little bit more information, right, to the scatter plot? Again, hue option. So we would like to split by origin. Yeah, and then we have 3 categories: US, Japan, and Europe. So by doing that, because right, so we were not using the colors much, right? You can make this gray, actually, nothing will change. You don't really need blue, right? Here, like in this particular plot, right? Because there is no color. Color is not telling anything in this case. Color, right? So, but here we want, okay, let's color speak. We would like color to say, is it US, Japan, and Europe? And we say blue is US, Japan is orange, and Europe is green. So if you look now, I think it's more interesting. So you can convey the trends, you can understand the trends separately for US, the trend for Japan, and trend for Europe. So one interesting thing, you conclude immediately here that Japan, they're just not doing heavy cars, right? They're more effective, so they are always more light. And they generally effective, right? Generally. Europe is kind of in between US, and only US has very heavy cars. Okay, so, but it's already kind of like gives you more information, right, about the data. Okay, so another thing is the size of, another thing we're not using here, right, the size of the dots. They're all the same, but we can actually vary them and they can tell us something. Right now, the size of the dots, they tell you nothing, right? They're just like data points. But we can change the size and they can tell us something, whatever you would like them to tell you. So in this case, how about horsepower, right? So the horsepower will be from small, close to 0, all the way to 240, right? So, and that will be the size. So we'll have 4 different sizes: very small one, and then like the largest one, and 2 in between. So you can see, for example, that generally the car which are not doing great on miles per gallon, meaning that you can go very little miles per gallon, they are typically very powerful cars, right? All of them are here, but not all the time. Some of them, like right here around 3,500, they are not, I mean, they're kind of like in between, just maybe they're just not effective, right? And typically the car, there is no powerful car which are very effective on miles per gallon. You can see it here, right? So you can, that's interesting, right? So that brings new insights why things are like that. There is explanation for that, basically, right? You say there is a reason why the cars, some cars are effective, because it and not, and what is the global distribution, right? This is what you're saying here, right? So that's quite a lot of information which you're kind of telling your audience by the scatter plot. Okay, so I think that's all about scatter plot. And I think obviously you can combine, and you can, if you're interested, you can ask TAs to combine both the size and the color. Might be too much because it will be busy. I think you want to balance, you know, like I think, but you can try and see if is it too busy over the plot, or you think that that's fine. Okay, so any questions about scatter plots? I think they're popular, powerful, and sometimes they're extremely useful, and we are using them a lot. And yeah, very traditional.
Yes. And for time, they also use scatter plot.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
show the time frame.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
time is also a numerical variable, and maybe sometimes it's
Yeah,
more often used a scatter plot, maybe without dots, but like a line. I mean, there is a possibility to produce a scatter plot, yes, for a time series, yes, but instead of dots, you show, so you can show dots connected with lines, yes, or just the line without these dots.
Yeah, but I would not, if there is a line, okay, so it depends. If you have, so if you have a line, if you have dots connected with line, that's a line, I would say, right? So, but then what are those dots? Are they, again, summary statistics, you know, like estimators, of their real numbers, right? So if that's a real,
for example, number of births per year, or
right,
number of deaths per year, was like death rate, for example.
Sure, yeah, like number of births per year, and then, but that's per year, so you will not have anything in between. I mean, you will have like per year, no.
Yes, per year, just one value. It's,
yeah. I mean, yeah, you can call them scatter plot, but really there is a, let's say, number. Yeah, I mean,
because it will look differently if
yeah.
you use line plot and scatter plot, especially for a long period of time, because I use these graphs very often.
You can do, actually, you can replace.
Most of the time I use scatter plots, especially for a long period of time, when you can use the scale, semi-logarithmic scale, to see the trend.
Yeah.
So it's not a mistake.
No, it's not. Oh, it's good. Yeah, I think it's like, also, I mean, it's probably less probably understandable. You can also use like the bar plot, right, where every bar is the number of birth or the deaths or something like this, right? And then, you know, also, I mean, we'll have just a lot of bars, I guess, right?
Yes, that is why, from the static point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great idea. Cool. Okay, great. So any other questions about scatter plots? Again, they're simple and powerful, and this is what makes them popular, I guess. Okay, so I think the last one will be the heat map, and then I would say they are the most intense in terms of the data you're displaying. And then that will be rectangular data, right? So what we mean by rectangular, we have multiple categories on the y-axis, and we have multiple categories on the x-axis. For example, here we have years, but we also want, actually that's about, like, for example, if we would observe like mortality, Olga said, or like birth rate, if we know the information per month, like we can do this kind of thing, right? And see if people tend to die or tend to be born in certain months, right? Across the years, for example, right? If we would have that kind of information. So in this case, we say year, and we split. So it's not only the year, but we're also interested in the trends across the year, right? We want to split some values across the months. So if that's the case, the data becomes rectangular, right? And we have some value, and whatever the value is, it goes from 0 to 600. So we want to look across. Okay. What the plot shows, it really depends, whatever you would like to show, right? But you're showing that on the rectangular kind of scale, not just like a linear one, but you're adding just another scale, right? You're not just looking across the years, but you're also looking kind of in 2 dimensions, right? If you wish. You're not looking across the years only, but you're also looking at the variation across the months. And then sometimes it's particularly useful because some journals do not allow tables as the part of the multi-panel figure. So by multi-panel figure, we mean the figure which is composed of multiple plots. So in that figure, you cannot insert table, but heat map you can. So it's kind of like visualization of the table. You can imagine this kind of having this kind of table, but you would like to be more concise and more kind of visually appealing, I guess, and make a heat map. Only able to show one thing, median or mean or sample size, right? So one thing, kind of similar with line plot, right? You can only show, you know, like count, any summary statistics, median, mean, count, like anything, right? One thing. So, okay, so we'll use the test data. We'll use the flights, right? Information about the flights. So year and number of passenger, right? So will be year, month, and number of passengers. But as you can see here, this is not rectangular, right? So that's kind of a typical data frame we were working with, right? Every line is the year, month, and number of passengers, but we would like to convert it to the kind of rectangular format. Okay, so first we need to download that. Let's say we call it metrics underscore data equal to snc.load underscore dataset, and the dataset will be called flights because it's provided to us by Cborn. Okay, so first thing you do with the data, you look at it, say, okay, makes sense, right? Okay, this is the data I'm dealing with. Okay, so how we convert? So this is what we need to do. So this is our data on the left. We would like to convert in this kind of format, which is very much heat map already. We just need to color it, right? So let's convert first. So to convert, we'll say pivot, right? And we'll say month, year, and the passenger. So we say first y-axis, right? Month will be y-axis, year will be kind of x-axis, and the values, right? What are the values here will be passengers. So we'll have number of passengers across years and across months. This is what we would like to do. So it's just grouping, right? So we're grouping kind of providing my multi-dimensional summary, right? So, okay, so this is what we're gonna do, right? So we loaded the metrics first. We say, okay, we looked at the data, you know, like right here, it doesn't look like here, right? We looked at the data and say, oh, it does not look as the rectangular data, but we know that to produce the heat map, we really need rectangular data. Okay, so we need to do the transformation, which we do here, and then we display the data again and say, okay, now it's great. Now it looks exactly what I need. Okay, so, and then as soon as you did you converted the data in the correct format, then it's simple. Then all you need to do, you need to say snc.heatmap and data equal to metrics data. And that's it. And you will get the heat map like this. Okay, so you can look at the heat map and see that the more, I think by default, the color scheme which is being used here, the more dark the color is, as less passengers were flying, as more high is more passengers were flying. And you can see, and then it's interesting, right? So you can see overall people are flying more. Obviously, the colors through the years are becoming less and less dark, but there is also some variation on another dimension, which is across the months. So you can see that it was not that obvious in the beginning when people started flying commercial flights, but as they do, they tend to fly in the summer more, you know, like than other months, for example. You know, so that's kind of interesting insight you would not get if you just do the line plot, let's say, right? So there is some interesting variation across the months in addition to the variation across the years. So you're looking at 2 types of variation. Okay, so one thing we can improve, we can say, let's display the raw values. How many times, like the values. So if you do that, you need to say annotation. It says ANNOT is equal to true, and you will get this one. Not probably like aesthetically appealing yet, you know, like you don't really see the numbers. So we'll think like what to do with that, right? You see I mean, numbers are there, but you cannot just read them for various reasons. First of all, they're kind of scientific format, right? They're not kind of normal numbers in a normal format. Okay, so let's see what we can do. So first, we need to see FMT parameter. So where D will stand for decimal integers, and .nf will be the number of number of data points. I think after number of digits after the point, after the comma, or like in this case after the dot. And for example, if you say 1.1f. So that will be just one digit, right, after the dot of the, because in the US we use the dot, and in Europe, right, I think we use the comma, right? So whatever you call it, but that's, so this is how you can present, right? Or you can say actually 0. For example, if you don't want, you know, if you have a floating number, but you don't want that to have any digits after the dot, you can just say, I guess, 0 here, and will be none. But in this case, we said, okay, we want to say 1. We want to have 1. So let's see if we can use this to help us improve the visualization. So what we'll say that actually it's even simpler in this case. It's D, right? So D, remember, D stands for decimal integer. So that's just the integer, right? Like a normal number. It's not a floating point number, but rather it's like a normal number. So in that case, we just say D. And then I think there is also f empty equal to D right here. And then actually, I think the result's already decent, right? You can read those numbers. And then, you know, you have, so now you have both. You have colors as well as the numbers, which is great, right? So it's not that busy of the plot, I would say, but it kind of nicely tells you kind of the general trends. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I think that's all. We'll not go into the heat maps much because I think that kind of setup here, I think it's already decent, right? And it's a decent heat map, which I think is capable of saying the trends, right? And I think it's kind of interesting, you know, like if you look at the flights from 1951, it's kind of starting to go kind of diagonal, where people tend to fly more in the summer, right? But not in the beginning, obviously. I mean, a little bit, but less, right? So yeah. So anyway, so there's a lot of information where you can look quite for a while on such heat map and try to derive some interesting trends. So I think looking at the data overall is very important thing to do all the time. And the visualization like this, it's a dense visualization with a lot of details, gives you the great opportunity. I think looking at the table will be less effective, right? But looking at the heat map like this you can immediately spot the trends. Okay, so any questions about the heat map?
Yeah, about the FMT parameter. FMT stands for formatting, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But can you explain the NF, .NF again?
Yeah. So basically, how many digits do you want if it's a real number, right? So it's not integer, but let's say is like 0. I mean, like here, let's say your number is 602.011, right? For example. So you say how many, or like even like 10, you know, like there's a lot of numbers after the dot, like dot, like 602.01235, whatever, you know, like a lot of things. So you say I cannot display it, right? Because I don't have enough room. So I need to cut it somewhere just for visualization. So where do you cut? You say, I really want to keep just one number, you know, like, so for example, this number is 602.0, but there is another one, 602.0.5, right? So in this case, you want to differentiate between them, because if you cut too much, both of them becomes, let's say, 602, right? And then you say, okay, I cannot differentiate between them, so I really need to bring one decimal after the dot, right? So in this case, will be 0, but can be like something else, right? So that's about like real numbers, non-integer numbers. So, but that's about visualization. There is no kind of mathematics, anything like this. Like basically, if you have a number, long one, I mean, a lot of digits after the dot, you just say where I want to cut, you know, like just so that people can see the number. Otherwise, they cannot see because there is I don't have space for so many digits, right?
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Great. And then, you know, like I mean, and then that's important thing, you know, like how we display the numbers. For example, if you have millions, right? Also, even though it's integer, right? Think those numbers will be millions, like here, right? Like think about those numbers are millions. which is probably the case if we display, you know, like the data nowadays. I think millions, even more, hundreds millions people are flying, right, every day and so on. So how you display that? You cannot put here million, obviously, because you don't have enough space. You know, the cell is limited. So what you do? Actually, if you see everything is a million, you can divide by million. So you can report number of millions instead of millions themselves. You know, like now you will have, I mean, think about this kind of heat map, but now 622 means 622 millions, for example. But you need to say that in the, I think you need to say that month, I mean, in your legend, like when there is a legend. And actually that's another thing we didn't do here, which perhaps you can do it kind of manually. If heat map is, I mean, if this Python is too hard to do that, you should say what are the units. And actually this heat map, I would say it's not ready to be reported, but you need to say number, what is what are the values? Number of people flying, number of passengers, you should say that. But for example, if you're reporting millions, so what you will say, number of passengers in parentheses, millions, right? So there's a lot of kind of technique how you kind of display the numbers, and you know, like, and then what is the good way? I think you're compromising like here. I mean, here we are not, but let's say if you're cutting the number, sure, you're removing some, but maybe but perhaps for visualization purposes, that's not that important, right? So you can do that. Okay, that's a great question. So any other questions?
I have one. Without modification of a dataset, could we obtain the heat map?
No, I think that's the definition. I mean, you mean this modification, right? Like pivot. What is that? This one, right? You're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think so, because the kind of definition of the heat map, at least in the Python, it is taking the data of the rectangular format. But that's one line. I would say it's not so bad, right? To do, you know, like I don't see the issue of running extra command, right? But that's how heat maps have some requirements. What is input data needs to be. So you need to satisfy those requirements.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions about the heat maps? Okay, so let's go then ahead. So I think a few more things. You can customize the color palette, and then, you know, like I think again, it's very important. And then there's a variety of pre-made palettes to choose from. You can look at this link, and there is multiple of them. Or, you know, like if you don't want to create your own one, but rather you want to use the existing one, so look here. But also it's possible to create your own palette. The simplest way is to use the codes of color you would like to use, right? So you can see here, for example, you can find those kind of tables at that link, you know, like that. There is this color, and you will have like the codes available. And then I think general suggestion, many people, I mean, not many, but there is a certain fraction of the people to be colorblind to this different degree in the population. And I think it's recommended to comply with the colorblind palettes. And I think there is actually not recent, but like there is a paper, Nature Methods, about that. You can have a look. So there is a discussion about which palettes are colorblind, which are not, and so on. Okay, so let's play here. So I think there are few available palettes for you in the heat map. For example, the palettes which is cool and warm. So cool means low values, you know, and warm will mean, I mean, will be displayed as the red ones, right? So if you see a C map equal to cool warm, that's the heat map you will get. And I think it's better, right? It's kind of more intuitively clear that red means more, you know, more heat, more people, more higher temperature, and yeah. So that's the heat map will look different in terms of the colors. Okay, so few more things about aesthetics of the figures. I think there is a little bit, like, for example, we have produced this plot, right? Remember when we combined the box plot and this strip plot. But there is few things you may consider to remove just to improve the aesthetics. I mean, it will not change your results or the way you present the results, but improve aesthetics, and it will look better. So I would say there are a few important things. Text, size of the text. In this case, we say day and the tip. Maybe we should increase that, right? It's a little bit, a little bit small. Size of labels, like from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, maybe we should increase those. Then what we call the spines, like the rectangular around. Like, do we really need it, right? Do we need those lines on the top or like on the right? Maybe we don't, right? They're not telling any new information, but rather, like they're useless in some stuff. I mean, if you like them, keep them. In my taste, like I would remove them. Okay. So, like I think there are different kind of styles, and we can say white grid or like dark. We want to be like dark color, or like white, have the ticks, like not have the ticks, like there are variety you can read about that. There is a variety of things you can improve aesthetics, and I think in the end that depends what you think is aesthetically beautiful. So I will share what we in my lab, what we kind of like follow, what practices we follow, and like you're free to follow that, or you can come up with your own. Okay, so I think actually again Cborn make things very simple. So there are 4 kind of types of the figure. So there is a type called paper, notebook, talk, and the poster. And I think the assumption is that the poster will be the most kind of like the highest, I mean, the largest size of the labels, as well as the thickness of the lines will be the highest, and so on. Talk will be less, notebook less, and the paper even less, right? So it depends where you put. I think it depends the size, like of the figure. If this figure is tiny, small, if you in that, we're gonna report in your talk, perhaps it will be small, but paper perhaps larger, but it's not necessarily all the time. Sometimes in the paper, the figures will be still small, only in the report. So if that's the case, the only way to deal with that, if the figure will be displayed small, the only way to deal with that, you need to increase the font size and make thickness of the lines to be bold and so on. Okay, so that's what I think like we will do first. We'll remove those spines. You remember those like lines around? I don't think they're necessary. So we remove them. So that's called despine, just like remove the lines. Okay, so I think it's better, again, to my taste. So that's one step we'll do. Okay, so that will be kind of the template I will provide for you, and you will practice with TAs. So how we kind of provide publication quality figure, right? Like how we make those improvements we have discussed so that the figure looks aesthetically appealing. Okay, so let's read. So we'll do the white style, like white background. We'll use the poster in this case, but you can change that. You can remember you have 4 possibilities: poster, talk, notebook, and the paper. You can actually try and see what will be the difference. In this case, we're saying poster, but you can change that. Now we say we do the box plot as typically as we do. Remember, right? We want to be transparent one, I mean white one, and then the lines to be black, just because on the top, we'll do the strip plot. And then we'll make the dots 50% transparent. Again, you can change that to make it less transparent, more transparent, and so on. And then I would like to explicitly name, the labels, right? I would like to name the x-axis and y-axis. I would like to say tip, and actually much better will be tip, what amount, what currency, let's say USD dollars, for example. That's, you should say the measure, the units, and the day, right? So you can really say informative titles of the y-axis and x-axis. And despine, right? Remove those kind of like 2 lines. Okay. So if we do that, that will be our box plot, right? So I think it's good, like I think it's clean, kind of sharp. You have, again, we can add tip USD dollars perhaps, but other than that, think it's quite nice. So I think that's kind of the general template you can use, like when you're producing the figures, and you can play with like other parameters, so to adjust for your needs. But generally, that's a good template. I think that's the most simple way to produce kind of a nice figure with the smallest number of commands. I think it's much better in this case. I mean, one reason we use Python over R, I think to produce this kind of figure in R will take you 5 times more lines, because there's a lot of parameters to tune with and so on. But I think this default, I mean, the disadvantage is very, like, set it up, poster, you don't have much possibilities. Like if there is only poster, talk, paper, whatever, notebook, so there is not much, but that can be sufficient, like, because otherwise, if you want not to customize it, it will take a lot of lines of code. So we will not go there. We'll just be with 4 types. And yeah, okay. So, okay, any questions so far? All right, so, okay, so I hope you like this kind of plots you will be able to produce today with TAs, and play, try poster settings, dark settings, like play with the settings. I think visualization is all about kind of exploring the parameters and finding the plot which we think displays the data in the best way. Okay, so saving the plot to a file, like once you are happy, satisfied with your figure, you can save it obviously to a file and use it. And then we'll use savefig. We'll use savefig function to do that, which will require file name as the argument. Okay, simple enough. Okay, so format of the file. So what is the extension, right? Like, you need to say, do you want to save it as PNG, as PDF, as JPEG, or whatever, right? The format, and you need to specify the path. Where are you saving your file, in which directory? And I think, like, I think TAs said that, and I think I said that, but I think it's important to kind of organize your data. Like in general, that's a general suggestion. We'll get back to that, but in general, that's really important to organize your data. And I think we talked about that in the very beginning. Like, as you have figures, it's nice. I think it's a good idea to save them to one location. Call the figures, and so on. Like not mixing that with the raw data, and keep, let's say, summary data separately, and so on, right? So that's crucial. So here you will create the directory where you want to save that figure, and you will specify the path where to save it. Okay, so one important point is, do you need to save it as the image or PDF? So they're fundamentally different. I mean, you can do both, like it's allowed to do both, while there's a huge difference. So PNG files are already converted to the pixels, and PDF files are vector images, like so. And as the vector images, they can, meaning they are still defined as vectors. And then what that means practically, that just means, that just means that you can change things when you do with PNG. You cannot do much if you want to edit, which is quite often. If you want to edit your PNG file with Adobe Illustrator or software like that, I think you will have limited capabilities. But you can do a lot and not lose the quality if you do PDF. So the message, like, to make it short, like, I think it's preferable to save it as the vector, because you can scale, like, and then change it and so on. So I would say save as the PDF, unless you have a strong reason to save it as a PNG. Okay. So that's good to know. Let's see. So to use the matplotlib, we'll just need to say matplotlib as import matplotlib pip plot as plt, right? So we'll write this command just to be able to use. Remember, we need to import libraries to be able to use the library, right? Okay, so now that will be your complete kind of settings, how you save the result of your kind of visualization, code-based visualization, right? So the middle part looks familiar. We already discussed it. So what we have added here, we imported matplotlib, right? That's what this line stands for. And then in the very end, we say plt, right? The whole reason we imported matplotlib just to be able to save it, right? So we said plt, which is matplotlib dot save figure. Now we say path to your Google Drive. We want to make sure that's already mounted. Then you say directory you created in your Google Drive, right? The one you created for this workshop, for this module. And then the name. So the name can be anything. So you say Boxplot, let's say .pdf. Let's say you decided to save as the PDF. Okay. I think that's basically, like the template you can use to do visualization, right? So obviously in the site, you will change it. And usually you start just by running, like producing the plot, right? And as soon as you're happy with that, only when you're starting to improve the aesthetics and saving that, right? But ultimately that will be your code or similar to this code to produce visualization and to save it. Okay, so we're gonna do this, right? You will do this with TAs and see that you're able to get similar or probably exactly the same box plot. All right, so and then you will save it. You will see that in your Google Drive, right? And it will look like this. I think it's quite clean, like again, the labels are large font, it's clean, there is no extra information. I think it's quite visually appealing. Okay, so there is an issue of truncation that, like not the entire figure will be displayed. To address that, you will use this parameter, bbbox underscore inches to be tight. So you want to feed the entire figure or whatever. So you will encapsulate all plot elements in the tightest way. That will just, you will make sure you're not cutting. I think here actually was cutted. As you can see here, I think was cutted something, like you don't see the number. So, but then running this command will ensure. So it's a good idea to always run it, this parameter, this kind of parameter, to make sure you're not cutting anything. All right. So I think few more minutes, and then I saw the TAs already here. So we'll need a few more minutes to finish, and then we'll take 15 minutes break, and and then you will start the hands-on session. All right. So hi Dotian, hi Aditya. So I think I need a few more minutes, and then after that we'll take a 15 minutes break, and then you can start. So if you have something to do, you can kind of come back like in 15 minutes or so, right?
Sure, no problem. Okay,
great. Thank you, guys. And whom should I make the host and whom should I make the co-host, just to make sure? So you have all the privilege.
Please make Aditya a host and I can be co-host.
Okay, sounds great. I will do that. Okay, cool. So for the class, so a couple of more minutes, I think we need to kind of like finish and then talk about kind of high level things like reproducibility and things like that, and we'll be done. Then you will take 15 minutes break, and then the hands-on session will start. Okay. So we discussed a little bit that the journals are imposing more strict requirements on how we report things. And if you're curious, you can read this paper, reproducibility. Let's get it right from the start. And there is a lot of discussion in the community, in scientific community, about what means reproducibility, transparency. So I think visualization plays a big role in that. Like showing data points. I think it's a good start. If we show the data points, I think that's some level of transparency. But if we share the code to produce the figures, I think that's great. And personally in our lab, that's a standard. So we're sharing everything, what is needed to produce all the figures from our paper. So, I hope if you go to any publication we have produced, you will find the code and the data so that you will be able to reproduce the figures, for example, and the analysis and the p-values and things like that, right? So that's we strongly believe in the reproducibility and transparency of the analysis we're doing. So we follow that. Okay, and what are the steps? I think in general, you need to share data filtering and pre-processing steps. So something what you do, let's say in Pandas, right? You have got your raw data, but you did some modification with Pandas. It would be nice to share that so you're transparent about your analysis. Then use effective visualization to show distribution and underlying data points, right? You would like to show data points. And this is what you learned. You know, like if you do Boxplot with data points, I think that's quite nice. And I would say that's in some sense state-of-the-art way to do things, right? And then ultimately, you know, like share the code and the data to make it reproducible. So somebody can come and say, okay, I take your code, I take your data, I open the notebook, I run it, and I get similar figures what you have produced. That brings trust to the analysis you're doing, but that's becomes more widely, again, very accepted standard, like how to do things. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I think that's it then. Okay, so right, so I think again, like, and then some journals require that. Some journals you cannot get away if you don't share the code to produce the figure and data. I mean, it's not happened widely across all the journals, but some journals like Nature family journals are requiring that, and then which I think is good, and then that's ultimately improving reproducibility of the analysis being done in biomedical sciences. All right, so that's I think all for the visualization I have. If you have questions, please feel free to bring them.